Is there a strategy that'll help you grow your company faster? CEO Sales Strategies is an investigative business podcast for entrepreneurial people who never stop asking questions. Highly acclaimed sales revenue growth expert Doug C. Brown interviews CEOs, business owners, and professionals who serve them to uncover and share actionable tips and methods behind their bulletproof sales strategies. Topics covered on the show include their failures, struggles, secrets, and processes that help them succeed in selling millions to billions of dollars of their products and services, all with the sole aim of helping you grow your business. If you are eager to know the most effective sales secrets from the A players of the game, then the CEO Sales Strategies podcast is certainly the place to be.
Hey everyone, this is Doug C. Brown with the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. We're going to do another great episode with a man named Mr. Brandon White. Brandon is at brandoncwhite.com. Brandon has had a couple of very successful exits. He's a pretty bright guy. He knows technology, sales, all kinds of things. We're going to talk about how we're going to get the right client and why it's crucial to get the right client, and how you do this through a number one vehicle that a lot of people will go, I don't know. And that's called the business plan. Brandon has a 13-slide business plan that takes less time to go from a flight in San Francisco to, say, Boston, and you could have your complete business plan done. If you are going to be a 1% earner in your industry and you're like, well, I own the company, great, you want a business plan. If you want to be a 1% earner in selling, you're also going to want a business plan as well. You must, and believe it or not, you want to and must review these things quarterly. We'll explain why just in a moment. Let's go talk to Brandon right now. Brandon, welcome to the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. I really appreciate you being here.
Hey, Doug, I'm so grateful for you having me on. So yeah, thanks a lot. I always enjoy our conversations. So I'm hoping that we can stay within the time frame of your podcast, because you and I always just tend to stay on the phone for a long period of time. But yeah, thanks a lot, man.
That's because you have so robust level of expertise. When I talk to you, I just don't want to get off the call.
No, I think it's the other way around, but I'm really grateful for that, Doug. Thank you.
We're going to talk today about why it's crucial to get the right client and why not doing that results in lost revenue. And that all kind of stems back from, you have a lot of expertise, but one of the things is a business plan. So if you wouldn't mind, let's talk about a business plan, because a lot of people, when they talk about business plan, they go, do I have to do a business plan? Like, what, what's the point, right? So what would you say to somebody like, okay, why do I have to do a business plan, Brandon?
Well, one, the science actually, I mean, real science, the studies show that you increase your chances when you build a business plan, period. They've studied thousands. I've looked at the research, the real research, scientific research. Having said that, you have to talk about the type of business plan. So this doesn't mean that you spend 6 months writing the business plan, which I did on my first company in 1996. It means you need a business plan so that you can at least put down some plan and have a map of where you're going. And what I did write that old school business plan in the beginning, Doug, and I'm sure you probably have, and listeners out there are hearing that. In fact, they taught that, got my MBA a while ago, but in business schools, they were still teaching these long-form business plans. And I asked them, like, when I had went to business school, it was after I had already started my first company and actually bought it back from the investors. And I ultimately sold it. But my question was, and I'd raised money, by the way, on another type of business plan. And I said, like, why are we doing this? And they said, well, it's an exercise, and that's fine, but it wasn't practical. So having a business plan, when I say it, doesn't necessarily mean maybe those thoughts that come up when you said what you just said, which is, hey, you got to write a business plan. And the person instantly thinks this is long form business plan and you need to write it out. No, I think you need, in my opinion, after I did, and I'm way too technical, but I took all my years of experience and a lot of failure, quite candidly, and then what worked. And I also studied what other people out there talk about, meaning what is Sequoia Capital, who arguably is one of the most successful venture firms in the world. What do they say? What did Peter Thiel say, who owns several venture firms and hedge funds and probably created some of the most impactful companies on earth or been involved in them? What does three other well-known people say? And I basically looked at that, took what my ideas were, and then came up with a plan that I've been using ever since, Doug.
And you just mentioned a key word that a lot of people go, what? Come on, research. Now, you and I were just talking about, you're coming out with a new book, and I don't even know the title. What's the title, Brandon?
Well, the working title is Back of the Napkin to Building a Business Plan in 13 Slides. So easy that you can do it on a flight from San Francisco to New York.
That's a great title. And I have to take a flight to San Francisco, so I'm going to test this out and give you feedback.
Yeah, I want you to do that.
So it won't be from New York; it'll be from Boston to San Francisco.
There you go. I mean, and I'm happy. I mean, I'm happy to go over the slides if you want, or however you want to do it. But it really is 13 slides. I think you could do it in 12. But it's also what I found. This was just from experience, Doug, of saying, okay, where would you use this? One, you're going to use it with your team on a regular basis. You're going to use it in sales calls on a regular basis, probably some version of it. And then you're going to use it to raise money, which if your company is growing and you're in some sort of growth mode, and you know this better than anybody, you're going to need capital. I mean, right. Sales teams sell, you're going to need capital. So, and usually those meetings, and I know I'm getting technical here, but I actually spent a lot of time thinking about this. The meetings are 50 minutes. So you see some people, even with a sales deck, which is a version of the business plan, but it's really a business plan for the product or service. They come in with like 22 slides or 30 slides. Tell me how that works. Tell me how that works. And not only do they do that, but they put a wall of words on there in 12 point, that's not even, sometimes a 10-point font because they want to get it on there. So just explain to me how you're going to, one, cover all that. And two is, as soon as you put it up there, the person's actually going to try to read it. And you're going to do that in 50 minutes. Yeah.
So you just described a meeting I had in Rochester, New York, about 8 years ago, before I knew what you teach, right? And I did the same thing, and it was just so much. I didn't even have time to finish it all, and hence I didn't get the money either, right? So the reality is, I like in a business plan. I'd like to get your feedback to this, because when I was in the military, we had an objective, and then we had a map. They'd drop us out in the middle of nowhere, say, hey, you got to go here. And we'd have a map and compass and, things like that. And we had to figure our way there and our way back. Now, a business to me without a business plan is like not having a map or a compass. You might have an objective out there. Hey, I want to do this. I talk to a lot of people, Brandon, who have missions, right? They want to drive a mission. I want to help this many people, or I want to bring this many software pieces into the world, or whatever it might be. So there's a mission out there. There's a goal. Or, I want to build $100 million company. There's a goal. But then when I dig into it, it's like, well, I just had this call. Lady wants to drive $1 million into her business in the next, by December 31st. She's a startup company, has no business plan, no map whatsoever. So,
we all want that. I'm raising my hand. Like how many listeners are listening right now who either have $1 million business or not yet, and all saying, hey, yeah, we want to add a few million to our revenue line. Of course we do.
Right. But how? How do we, you know what I mean? Like, what's the plan? Isn't that what the business plan is for? Is to like talk through these points of how we're going to achieve this?
It is. And I think sometimes I get the feedback on me, which I do a 360 review every single year. And I try to make everything easy, which is my psychology background, because I have a master's in psych and I study that. And if you don't make it easy, people aren't going to do it. One. So I ask people who are close to me or not close to me to describe me in 4 words and tell me my strength and weakness every year. In fact, I actually put it on my podcast. I'm not scared to be completely open. What I tend to be is very intense, because I try to get to the bare metal, if you will. Like using your example, someone's mission is to to have everyone have their software. Or here's the thing, no one cares what your mission is. What they care about is what problem you're solving for them, which is what the business plan answers. That may be your mission. That may be your goal, but it's so self-centered. And the business plan brings out, well, actually, what problem are you solving for the customer? And if you do not do that, the customer doesn't care what your mission is. It's one of the biggest. I just did an elevator pitch training, which is slide 1, because you put up your title of your company and your logo, Doug. And here's what people want to do in their elevator pitch. Hey, Doug, Brandon White, I've got an MBA, a master's in psych. I've done 2 companies, failed 22 times. I was a venture capitalist. I worked at America Online in marketing, and I did the financials in marketing. And I have a service that can help you with your marketing. First of all, you weren't even listening when I actually told you what I did. And because no one cares. I mean, what's the number 1 looked at page by a visitor on LinkedIn?
Ooh, this is an interesting question. Number 1, I don't know, Brandon. You got me.
It's the visitor's own page.
Ah, okay. All right.
Why? Because we like hearing our name. You teach this, right?
Yeah.
People like to hear their name. They like to talk about themselves, hear about themselves, and look at themselves. It's like people when they go into the gym, as another example. People will say to me, well, Brandon, I can't go into the gym because everyone's looking at you. No one's looking at you. They're looking at themselves in the mirror. They may glance at you, but they don't care. I mean, so going back to the business plan, it really dials you in on what you're doing and gets it down to the bare metal, which is what took me a long time. And I learned this. I'm not throwing stones. I learned this in a sales meeting. I'm not going to say what company. I was in a Fortune 100 company meeting with a C-level person. And I got in there because one of my investors at that time in that company knew the person. And we did have a good product that would solve a problem from a real problem that they were having in their CRM, actually. And I don't say I was nervous, but all the things that I teach and do, I just, for whatever reason, I walked through this doorway and lost it. And I'm trying to explain why we're so good and why we have PhDs and we did all this research. And he walked down and he's like, hey, don't ever do that again. And I was like, what? What do you mean don't ever do that? It actually went okay, didn't it? And he's like, it went okay, but you could have cut that meeting in half and we could have gotten the sale, an absolute sale, if you would just shut your mouth about talking about yourself and what all the people on this company did or have achieved and just told him what problem you solved for him. And that was a pivotal moment in my life. And from then on, I always lead with the pitches, which is what problem are you solving? And you know if you are good at your elevator pitch if the other person asks you what your name is, how you came up with it, and what's your story. But you don't get to tell that. And that's what the business plan model that I came up with does for you, is it teases that out. And you can, when I teach it in person, you can watch people squirm. I've taught 1,500 people and you can literally see them shifting in the first 15 minutes of this training, or it's a class, how painful it is.
We're speaking with Mr. Brandon White. He's at brandoncwhite.com. And I love the fact you got C there because I'm Doug C. Brown. What's the C stand for? I always tell people C stands for charming, but I'm not really sure what.
Oh, that's right, Doug. That's all we need to say. So what's next on this? No, I'm kidding. It's good. It's Christian. And I don't really like putting my middle letter in because there's actually, it just sounds too formal. But I was held up at an airport for a Brandon White who is a criminal. So now I put the C in. Maybe you have the same thing.
No, I don't have a criminal. I have a hockey player. Doug Brown's a professional hockey NHL player. So people used to think I played hockey, and I'd fall down on skates. So that's just part of the deal. I love the fact, it's problem solving and the business plan talks about that. Let's go through. Do you mind going through the slides?
No, I can tell what they are. I don't think we'll have enough time
Sure.
to go through each formula. And I'm not saying that because I want anyone to buy the book or take the course. It really takes a minute, but it doesn't take that long. But let's go through. There's 13 slides in this model. The first one is your name of your company and your logo, which is where you give your elevator pitch. And it's vitally important to me. And I think, it's same thing in sales. You got to get that elevator pitch right. And it's one sentence.
Right.
And it's not 30 seconds. It's less than 10. And people look at me and say, well, that's not possible. It's possible, but it's going to take a lot of hard work to get that. And if you can't do that, then it's too complicated. And humans don't have enough time for that. So slide 1, elevator pitch. Stop me anytime here if you have a question on any of these. Number 2 is the problem slide. So what problem are you solving? Not what your mission is, any of that. A person does this. The pain they experience is this. The outcome is this. That's the formula. That's what you have to put on that slide. Not 5 sentences. It's actually big 34-point font. And it needs to be that simple. Then the solution, a solution or the solution, and then which is going to be your product or service. Slide 4 is your product. Slide 5 is the market opportunity. And I'll mention that I teach that class and students still come back with the wrong thing. You can't build that. It's not 1% of a market. And I know you teach this too, Doug, and in all the things you do. It's from the bottom up. Meaning,
let's elaborate on that one, because I don't think everybody's going to get that one, Brandon. Like you and I do, because we talk. But from the bottom up, what does this mean?
So what people will put on that slide is, "Hey, Doug, I'm building a software company. It's let's do something else. I'm going to sell windshield wipers. I'm going to make this really simple. And the automobile parts market in the United States is 10 billion. I'm using round numbers here. Right. And we're going to get 0.5% of that. And that's going to equal 0.5% times 10 million. I don't have my calculator here, but X amount of money. And that's how much revenue that's how much this company can be worth. That's a top down. The bottom up is, and includes your rollout schedule, because this is your plan. It means I live in Half Moon Bay, so I'm selling windshield wipers, and I'm going to sell, let's even make it more specific. I'm going to sell a high-end windshield wiper that doesn't degrade in the sun, which is a big problem in California because it doesn't rain all that often. The windshield wipers sit in the sun, and then when it rains, scratches everybody's windshield. This is a real thing. I'm going to sell, you and I are, we're going to sell this high-end windshield wiper. So what I'm going to do is say, how many people live in Half Moon Bay, California? How many cars does the average household have? And then I'm going to figure that out. And then I'm going to make some guesses here, but I'm going to say, how many people are going to get a generic windshield wiper to replace their other one? And how many of them are going to buy the high end? And there's probably about, 10% people. And that's how I'm going to get my number. And what that's also, and you're going to keep building that out. Now I'm going to go from Half Moon Bay in my rollout schedule to say, well, I'm going to do San Mateo County. Now I'm going to do Northern California, or NorCal, so San Francisco Bay Area. And then I'm going to go to the Central Valley, and then I'm going to go to Southern California. Then I'm going to take on a new state and do the same sort of thing. And what this does for your market opportunity is one, shows you some realistic numbers, because everything we're doing here is going to translate into your Excel spreadsheet in your financial projections, of which another thing that nobody does, which they should, because they'll say, oh, it's a guess, Doug. Yeah, I don't care that it's a guess, but you won't even understand what you don't even have an idea what your customer acquisition cost is to know if that line in your P&L is right. So I don't want to get too deep here, so you can shut me up. But basically what that does is it says, okay, and then you're matching this market opportunity with your timeline, and now we have a plan, because the other one is no plan. And I'm sure you see this probably more than I do because you're very focused on the sales part of a business. But I met with some entrepreneurs. They literally told me this. They're like, hey, we're going to get 0.5% of this market and it's $30 million. And I said, okay, so walk me through on your spread. So let's switch to your spreadsheet. And can you go to the tab on your spreadsheet that shows me your marketing and how we're going to get that 0.5%? And you're laughing for those who are listening.
I'm laughing because I know it's coming.
Right. There's no tab.
Right.
They don't know. And then what happens is you either launch, and this isn't just for new businesses, you know this, and listeners, this isn't about just new businesses. This is about existing businesses that are expanding their product or service who don't do this. Or they'll just say, hey, we're just going to upsell our existing customers into that. Okay, well, can you go to the tab on your spreadsheet that shows me that, and they'll say, well, we have an email list of 500,000 people. Okay, so show me the waterfall of that marketing and how that's going to translate into sales and how that flows through. And it just never happens. And now we're just guessing, we're blowing in the wind. So that was a long answer to your market opportunity, but that's what we're doing on that slide.
Well, and if one does that in an investor meeting, the game's over right there, right? It's very unlikely that anybody's going to move forward from that point forward. You've already, that person has already lost the deal. My brain's firing off the question. So so should one do a business plan once, or should they do it every year, or should they do it every quarter, 3 years, or how often does a business plan, or should a business plan be done?
And that's a great question. I'm glad you asked that. And I forgot to say that in the beginning. The business plan that I'm talking about is a dynamic business plan that's so easy to build and use that I think should change it quarterly as it relates to new data, so that you can, because you're going to experience new data and you're going to update it. And theoretically, your finance person, you may be that if you're listening, you may also be the CEO and the dishwasher and everything else, or you may be the CEO and have a finance person. They're going to adjust their quarterly things anyway. So I believe that at least you go in there and you do it quarterly. Some people say, I can't do that, I don't have enough time. Okay, fine. Then you should at least do it in your shutdown meeting at the end of the year for your next year. And, I find a lot of businesses in the SMB space aren't even doing shutdown meetings. And I'm wondering, like, okay, well, how do you plan? Oh, we plan in January. Well, that's like, I'm planning right now. Our shutdown meeting is soon because got to figure out what 2023. So I think that you should do it at least yearly, at least so you have this roadmap and you have something to refer to, which is what I do. Is I keep hours open on my computer all the time because it's so easy to veer off into, especially as a business owner, entrepreneur. It's like, you're going to chase a shiny object. You want to build a new product. You want to build a new service. And it's like it's a billboard just sitting there, like a Post-it note that's like, hey, this is where you were.
Yeah.
And if it's in front of you. So that's my answer. I think quarterly, if you have a good process and your company's big enough to have infrastructure to run that, but at a minimum yearly.
So what I love about that is it tells us what to say no to as well. And when we're doing quarterly reviews and then a shutdown meeting at the end of the year, you want to define shutdown meeting so people who aren't aware of what that is might be.
So for us and all the companies that I've had and run, it is a complete shutdown of the business. Not that we're not selling, but we're not doing anything else. And it's usually can be 3 days to 5 days, depending on how big your company is. And we are walking through what we did the previous year and what our goals are the next year, usually done at the C-level and or senior VP level. I think would be in a bigger company, 100 million plus or 50 million plus. And we're setting all our goals, including our pipeline. And it's a painful thing, but it's basically, that's all you're doing that week. In some of the days we would allocate, and I'm talking about the structure, but it's a planning session for the following year where you're setting all your strategic goals in addition to your actual numbers, your product launches, whatever you're going to do. And in ours, we emphasize a lot the sales pipeline and I'm using this word avatar. I hate the word because it's overused and then people never do it. But what are the customers that we're going after in a government company that I ran that was in the government space? We defined seven contracts that we wanted, and that was our sole focus. And the only way in a quarterly meeting that you could undo that was if there was literally a brief written, 2-page brief that says, here's the opportunity, here's why we should do it. Because otherwise, if you don't have that rigor, you get the shiny object. And by the end of the year, you chase 20 things and you didn't get any of them. So having that shut down with all of your people, we actually check the phones at the door. So because it requires that level of concentration. And then you have your business plan and you go in and you execute on it. And now it's an execution exercise, not a research exercise on the spot. Is that about how you see your shutdown meeting?
Yeah, that's pretty close to what we do as well. Now, the interesting part of what you're saying to me, like my head's going off. Like I remember one of the companies that I was helping, we actually had 30,000 businesses go through this. And I did this research. And the first question we asked them was, when's the last time you reviewed your goals from the time you started your business? And it blew my mind that the majority of companies, and I'm talking well over 90% of companies, never reviewed a goal ever from the day they started the process. Now, these are companies that are doing up to say 20, 30 million, most of them, right? Now, the larger companies reviewed it on a quarterly basis, just as you're saying. So if somebody's listening to this, they're going, okay, this makes sense. I'm going to challenge you on this right now. Sit down and do a business plan again, right? Sit down and figure out where you're going and try this through a quarterly basis. You don't have to be perfect. But it will tell you things like what to say no to. Because as entrepreneurs, a lot of times what I have found, Brandon, especially with myself, it's like, oh, I can monetize that. Oh, I can monetize that. And, I got 15 ideas in the next 3 months that I can monetize. And sometimes I feel myself creeping into it. And then I'm like, oh, I shouldn't have gone down that path, right? But if I had revert back to the business plan, like you said, 7 clients, that's it. We're going after those. That's our target. Then I would have been able to say, no, I'm not going to actually go down that path. And I find that to be so invaluable for people, and the people who don't do it. And that's why I'm so grateful you brought it up. The people who don't do it, those are the ones that usually are kind of stuck and they're saying, I know we could do better. I just can't figure out why.
I agree. The other thing that I say to people I say, well, what's your plan? Or to your point, where did you do your review? I don't care when it is, or like when's the last time. They're like, oh, I got it in my head, Brandon. I'm like, okay. And I basically go to the front of that meeting room and pick up the marker. And I say, let's walk through the 13 slides. Tell me what we're doing. Like, you got it in your head. Let's help me understand it. And we all know what happens there in general. I mean, some people, they can get most of it, but it's not in your head. And for me, Doug, I'm the worst offender of all being an entrepreneur most of my life. Most of my life is, it's a relief, because I'm thinking about, like you said, hey, I could make money there. Well, we could make money. We could tie that into this, and we could spin that out. And it's like, no. And then it just stops you. It's like stops you going down that drain. And it's a relief to me. Like someone which was me, telling myself, or us in the company, telling ourselves what to do. And it's sort of a relief sometimes when someone tells you what to do and just says, okay, here's what you're focused on. Here's what you're doing. You're like, okay, I can get back to work and actually get some work done.
Makes a ton of sense. And getting it out of your head does magical things. You get to look at it from the outside in, and now you're looking at it and going, oh, okay, well, maybe this wasn't exactly what I thought was in my head, And I will tell you all that if you don't get it out of your head, then you'll forget part of it, A. B, you'll resent part of it later on. I guarantee this is going to happen. I'll bring my wife up here. A lot of times she'll be thinking about something, and I know she's thinking about it, and she's like, just thinking about it. I'm like, well, tell me what you're thinking about. She goes, well, I don't really have it well formed yet. I'm like, just tell me anyways. Cause I know, Brandon, if I don't get that out and it's something that's kind of like she's thinking about, it could be me who's the problem, right? So I want to head that off right now and then change the business plan, if you will, for the quarter of what I'm going to do next. So I think this is a great analogy in life. Obviously, we're not going to have time to go through all 13 of these. Is there some, like, how do people kind of get access to this?
Well, I will give you a download, and I did do it on my podcast. I went through these very short on the podcast, so we could put a link to that. And I try to give it away because I would give it away for free. You and I have talked about this, but you shouldn't do that. But I'll give the outline away so that, because I want people to have this tool. It's not my mission. I just know how valuable it is, but it does take a lot of discipline. It really does. It's not easy. I think that what I've learned in life is that if something isn't easy and it doesn't somehow incorporate into an existing habit, it doesn't happen. So even on goals, people tend to, at the beginning of the year, come up with like 15 goals. Like my model, my formula is 3 goals,
Right.
one for my business, one for my actual health, and one for my personal life. That's it. My exercise on this first of the year is really easy. And all these other people are coming up with 20 goals. You can't do 20 goals. You can barely focus on, multitasking isn't even a thing, except for like 1% of the human race. So it's just not possible.
And it's when we have 20 things, life happens, right? So it's kind of like the gym analogy, right? The gyms get all filled up in January and February due to resolutions, but come March, they start thinning out again. By April, they're back to normal. I can't remember. It was 8 to 12% occupancy is what the gyms on an annual basis of memberships actually, that's what the number used to be. So, but in January, February, it swells up in a big way. But if they don't have a habit, as you're saying, across this whole thing, then it's kind of, it gets easy to kind of like forget. So it's like, get up, go to the gym, exercise your mind, exercise your body. You're going to be way better. When you have a plan, when we all have a plan to do this, we could do the same thing with our businesses, because we could look at those and go, okay, this is the plan. We're going to follow a plan. And of course, I want to ask you this question. Does the plan ever, like quarter to quarter, but if you're into some quarter and it's like, well, this isn't kind of working out, do you go retool the business plan at that point, or what do you do?
I do. And I encourage people to do that. It doesn't take long. That's the point. It doesn't take that long. This isn't a 8-week exercise. This is, at that point, probably an hour, unless you have to do some research. So if it's, hey, we're going to launch a new product or service, you're probably going to want to do some market research and at least some modeling in your spreadsheet to say, we're going to leverage existing customers. Here's what we think our conversion rate is. Here's our contribution analysis, and at least see if you can make some money in there. But from a high level standpoint, like, this should be no more than an hour or 2 exercise. And I encourage that because it's going to change. That's the point. It just has to be easy to do so that you can get it down. And I think the idea around business plans has been, I need a business plan to do this event, which is either start a company, raise money, and then I'm never going to do it. And my question is, great. If you're not doing that, what is the tool that you're using to guide your business? Because I want it.
Yeah, that makes total sense. And again, I love the simplicity part of it, right? Because it doesn't have to take a long time. And so many people, when they think of business plans, and you and I alluded to this in the beginning, in the old days, it was like gigantic. And I remember doing those, and I was like, this took me months to put a plan together sometimes.
A waste of time.
Yeah, it is a total waste of time. But we can stay healthy. Just, by the way, all those people, I don't want to go to the gym. Go to the gym, or do it at home. Do 20 push-ups, 20 something for your abdominals, 20 squats, and I don't know, one other exercise, right? It's 4 exercises. It takes you 15 minutes. And if
so I just want to say, because I wasn't going to say it, but you brought it back up. So is that one of the most genius gym business plans that I have ever seen is this. Most gym memberships say, hey, Doug, $50 a month, whether you come or not. This was in Europe. I read about it. If somebody's really interested, get in touch with Doug or me and I'll look it up. It's in a book somewhere. But their model was this. It's free to come to the gym, but you have to come twice a week. And it might have been 3 times a week. If you come 3 times a week, gym membership's free for everyone, but they know nobody does it. But if you miss, it's $50, which is a normal gym membership. And here's the genius about that. One is there's huge fall off. And 2 is they won't cancel their gym membership because they feel guilty because they failed, not the company.
Right. That's so cool.
It's a genius. It's one of the most genius business plans. I think it was in a book called Freemium. A guy wrote it a long time ago in the first wave of the internet. And that's what you use that case study, but totally free. But you got to come to the gym. Now I would do that. And one other point to listeners as a tip is you are absolutely right about, there's a lot of times, like I am a gym fanatic. I try to ride my bike 100 to 200 miles a week. Really, it's sort of my meditation, but sit-ups has made a big difference in my life, from everything from my posture to how I feel to even riding my bike to anything I've done. Sit-ups is one of the things that's really helped me. Push-ups too, but I have the ball in our living room next to our kitchen because it's easy. And I'm emphasizing this thing that you said, you got to make it easy. If it's easy, you will do it. If it is not easy, you will not do it, or it will take a really long time and you'll fail. So
it's the same thing with a business plan. That's what I love about what you've done. You've broken it down and to make it very simple so that people can actually do this in an hour. And once you do it over and over again, it'd probably take you less time if, once you certain adjustments quarterly. So there's really no reason not to do it, except you just don't do it, really, when it comes down to it. And I will say, since, here at the CEO Sales Strategies, we teach people how to be in the top 1% of sellers. If you're a person who wants to be in the top 1%, you better be doing a business plan for your sales, personal sales, every single quarter, because that's going to tell you what to do and what not to do. And we, especially in these times, Brandon, I think because things are changing all the time. The pandemic stirred things up, but I still see them changing all the time. And people are kind of like shifting back and forth. Like, now, maybe I want to go to a live event now. I didn't want to before because of the pandemic, but now I just want to get back with people. Well, as sellers, we've got to adjust to those times as well. And if we're not doing this on a quarterly basis, we're just going to get complacent. And then before you know it, you've added 20 pounds to your body. And it's like, why do I feel sluggish? Well, why are your sales sluggish? The same reason. So it's kind of a life business parallel. But Brandon, how do people get a hold of you, or to say there? Oh, by the way, what's the name of the podcast? Your podcast? I want to make sure.
The podcast I do is called The Edge, and it's basically to give you an edge to win in your business and your life. You can check that out at myedgepodcast.com. And thank you for doing that. I'm grateful. I have my personal website where I have everything that you can get a hold of me. It's my real email, my real phone number. Everything's on there. Is brandoncwhite.com.
For charming or charismatic or courageous, or we'll come up with a C for you.
Yeah, I don't want to take yours, but I like charming.
That's awesome. Brandon, thanks for being on the CEO Sales Strategies podcast. Thanks for bringing your A game. I really appreciate you being here.
Yeah, Doug, thank you so much for having me. I always love the opportunity to talk with you in a conversation. I always learn something. So thank you so much.
All right. Wow. Lots of notes here. What did you learn? What did you learn? Now, I hope you learned that doing a business plan is the map and the railroad, if you will, to your goal. In other words, when you do a business plan, you are on a track. You get a track down that's going focused to that goal. You want to continue that train ride, if you will. Now, do you have to do the whole train ride in a month? No. That's why you will work on this every quarter. You review, because sometimes you might run into things like business weather, inclement weather, if you will, and you're going to want to adjust. This is why it's so important to have a business plan and why it's important to adjust on a quarterly basis. because what you're doing now may not be what you're doing 6 months from now. In other words, you might be on that right track, but you'll find something opportunity-wise that comes along and you'll adjust your business plan. Don't put too many goals in the business plan, as he said. He keeps it down to 3, right? And keep it simple, 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 because you can implement simple. If you make it all this complexity stuff, like people want you to put together a 44-page business plan. That's insane. You don't need that. If you're a 1% earner in the world, you have a business plan. You must, because you're reviewing where you are, where you want to go on a consistent basis. And now you know what to say yes to and what to say no to. So if you love the subject matter, by the way, get his book. Okay. This is a great book. Get his book and download in what we got here for you. You can download the overview of the plan. So in his book, he goes through this in much more detail. If you love this content, if you love content like this and you want another subject matter on the whatever it is that you're looking for, maybe you're the expert, maybe you know the expert, maybe you don't know the expert, send an email to us at youmatter, youmatter, at ceosalesstrategies.com. Let us know what your idea is. Maybe we have you on the podcast, or maybe we find the expert for you and we'll bring that content to you. We'll get back to you either way. We'll let you know one way or another. This works or doesn't work. If yourself or somebody you know wants to get into the top 1% of sellers, in other words, earners worldwide in your industry, making a minimum of $500,000 a year and up net selling, then reach out to me. Or if you're a company who wants access to these elite performers who are highly trained, reach out to me at doug@ceosalesstrategies.com. Well, that's it. We have another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies. We're wrapping up. As we say, go sell something today. Sell a lot of it, but sell it profitably. Play win-win. In other words, you win, they win. Make someone happy, make yourself happy, and have a great rest of your day. To your success.
Thank you for listening to another episode of the CEO Sales Strategies Podcast. What is something that you learned that you could act on today? Don't forget to schedule it now, or it may never get forward momentum. If you find our content valuable, please leave a favorable review and let us know what you liked. Please also share this with others if the content will help them. For our show notes, other episodes, and more interesting content and resources, please visit ceosalesstrategiespodcast.com. See you soon, and to your continued success.